Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're basically acting as your guide on a modern hero's journey. We're going to explore how to completely conquer that paralyzing anxiety you get when making difficult life choices. The source material we're diving into breaks down the actual mechanics of human decision-making. It reveals this massive blind spot we all share, but more importantly, it gives us a remarkable tool to overcome it. So get comfortable and let's jump right in. Why is it so hard to take our own advice? Think about a really tough choice you're avoiding right now. Go ahead, bring it to mind. Maybe it's a huge career move, setting a strict relationship boundary, or a scary financial pivot. You can probably literally feel the heavy weight of that indecision sitting right in your chest. Now, why is it that you can be completely paralyzed by this choice, but if a friend came to you with the exact same issue, you'd know exactly what to tell them? Notice the profound contrast here. When it's our own problem, our internal monologue is just a chaotic, anxious mess, right? We're absolutely terrified of making the wrong move. But when it's our friend's problem, wow, we're suddenly this calm, wise philosopher. We see the variables clearly, we weigh the outcomes objectively, and we hand out calm, rational advice without even breaking a sweat. As the source material points out, our true potential is so often hidden and our growth stunted by these erroneous ideas of who we are and what we're supposed to be. To understand why this happens, we have to define what a problem actually is. The text defines a problem as the discrepancy between your aspirations and your experience of reality. So here's the crucial point. A problem isn't just wanting something you don't have, like a flashy new job. And it isn't just having something you don't want, like a mountain of debt. The problem is the actual spatial gap between your expectations and reality. And you know what? That gap is exactly where decision paralysis lives and breathes. That brings us to the fog of emotion. This is basically the primary obstacle, the dragon of our story, if you will. The text explains that our worldview actually distorts our needs. We're constantly filtering reality through these thick layers of unconscious beliefs, attitudes, and really intense emotions. So when we're deep inside the problem, we just can't see it clearly. This emotional fog obscures the cold hard facts, it heightens our fears, and it makes that gap between expectation and reality feel entirely uncrossable. The source material breaks down exactly how this fog completely betrays our own logic through some specific cognitive distortions. First up is emotional reasoning. This is the tendency to believe that just because you feel a certain way, it absolutely must be objectively true. Second is egocentric bias, basically seeing yourself as the absolute center of the universe. This playfully but kind of tragically makes every potential personal failure feel like a world-ending catastrophe. And finally, confirmation bias, where you unconsciously select only the information that reinforces your existing fears, while completely ignoring the overwhelming evidence that you're actually going to be okay. Which brings us to this incredibly powerful quote cited in the text from M. Scott Peck. Emotional sickness is avoiding reality at any cost. Emotional health is facing reality at any cost. To move forward, we have to actively choose to face the uncomfortable reality of our situation. We have to stop hiding behind our emotional reasoning and our biases. But how do we actually do that when the fog is just so incredibly thick? Well, here is the magic weapon for your journey: Solomon's paradox. When you are paralyzed by a difficult personal choice, this cognitive trick asks you to imagine that you are making the exact same decision for a friend. That's literally it. It's a deliberate shift in perspective designed to immediately unlock the clarity and wisdom you already possess, but are currently just locking away behind your own anxieties. And here is why it is so remarkably effective. Taking this outside perspective actively reduces your emotional bias and brings greater clarity. By removing the you from the equation, you completely bypass the ego, the fear, and that intense emotional reasoning we talked about that's clouding your judgment. You're no longer the frightened protagonist of the story. You become the wise, objective observer. It is a profound psychological pivot that instantly clears the fog. So, what would you tell your best friend right now? Let's put this into practice. Think back to that big problem we brought up at the beginning of the explainer. If your best friend came to you, sat down, and said they were absolutely terrified to leave a toxic job, or to have a really difficult conversation with their partner, what would you say to them? What calm, rational steps would you tell them to take? Notice how quickly the obvious next steps reveal themselves when the threat isn't directed at you personally. Okay, so applying the outside perspective. How do we systematically apply this mental model to slay the dragon of indecision in the real world? Because it's one thing to understand Solomon's paradox in theory, right? but the source material provides us with the systematic methods needed to actually investigate our worldviews and make suitable changes. We need a reliable framework. And here it is. These 3 actionable steps form a simplified framework that turns an overwhelming personal crisis into a totally objective problem to be solved. Step 1, consciously step outside of yourself. Step 2 is vivid visualization. Actually picture a specific friend standing in your exact shoes. And step 3, give them the advice. By methodically following these steps, you detach from that paralyzing fear of failure. Why? Because in this mental exercise, you aren't the one taking the risk.
Now, to make absolutely sure the advice you're giving your friend is sound, the text recommends filtering the situation through 4 distinct lenses to uncover any lingering blind spots. First, facts and evidence. What do you know for sure, without any assumptions? Second, logic and reasoning. What makes sense based purely on cause and effect? Third, emotions and intuition. Look, you must recognize that feelings are data, even if they aren't facts. And fourth, the outside perspective itself. What would a truly neutral, wise person say about all this? This powerful quote from Antonio R. Damasio highlights exactly why we need this paradox in the first place. We are not thinking machines that feel, we are feeling machines that think. I mean, you can't just flip a switch and turn your emotions off, right? It simply doesn't work that way. But you can skillfully route around them. Solomon's paradox is the ultimate tool for navigating a brain that is hardwired to feel long before it ever starts thinking.
When you're giving this advice to your friend, keep 2 final mental models from the text in mind. First, uphill decisions. When faced with 2 choices, advising the one that is more painful in the short term, like finally initiating that difficult conversation, usually counters our natural bias for comfortable inaction. Second is the hesitation heuristic. If a decision involves your core values, your personal growth, or your integrity, the text notes that leaning into a yes is often the right, albeit way more difficult, uphill choice. As we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with a direct call to action. Think about that specific problem or area of life you are currently trying to navigate. Stop punishing yourself for being stuck in the emotional fog. Instead, step back, look at the situation objectively, and finally give yourself a friend's advice. You already have the wisdom you need. You just needed the right perspective to unlock it. So ask yourself, what would your life look like a year from now if you finally started taking your own advice?